All right, everybody, let's get to the Olympics and everything that took place over the past month or so. First thought is, all things considered, I think Tokyo did a solid job. We knew coming into it with the pandemic that it was going to be a very, very tough Olympics. And we'll get to some of the specifics of why this one was a little bit different than others. But I think that, and you knew that when you bring in all these people from around the world, literally, look, in the United States, where we record, there have been issues with people testing positive and super spreader events and vaccines and all of that stuff. Multiply that by hundreds because that's how many people, that's how many countries were in the Olympics. Maybe not hundreds, but you get what I'm saying. From all the continents, all coming into one location, and some are test positive, some didn't. So it was just a very tough situation health wise. And you had people that tested positive and didn't even get to compete in their events, which is very unfortunate. Now we'll see what happens over the next few weeks because I'm sure some of these athletes are going to come back positive for COVID, and that's going to be something that they'll have to deal with, and maybe with their Olympic representation with their respective countries. So that's all going to take place. But I thought, all things considered, they did a solid job. It was unfortunate seeing the biggest thing that I saw was just a lack of energy in the stands. For the contest, there was no one in the stands. Now, I shouldn't say no one. You had other Olympians and teammates in the stands for events. I think you had a handful of family and maybe some. It just wasn't the same as far as having people in the stands. Like I'm watching the wrestling, and I'm watching the equestrian, and even the beach volleyball, all the arenas, and these beautiful arenas in handball, my favorite non-traditional American sport that I follow. So I'm watching all of these events, and the arenas look great, and it's just, man, you wish people were in the stands for it because that would have added so much energy to the festivities. But that just was not able to happen. But they got through the Olympics a year later, and that was, I think, they just got through. They got it done, and I thought that it was. And yes, the TV ratings, and I heard Chris Russo, Mad Dog, who I'm a very big supporter of, and I grew up listening to him, and I still listen to him on Mad Dog Unleashed. But he started the Olympics, said it was a terrible Olympics because the rating's going to be low and the time zone differences and all of that stuff. Look, NBC, did they take a bath in this? All things considered, probably. Because whenever the Olympics, and this happened, this is back in 2000, when the Olympics were in Sydney, Australia, and the time difference is pretty substantial. Whenever the Olympics, winter or summer, as far as the United States goes, is in another part of the country, non-European. Well, it was in South America. It was in Brazil 4 years ago in Rio. The time difference, they're in Eastern time zone, so there was really no difference there. But whenever you get towards Europe, and especially when you get to Asia, whether it's Beijing or when it was in Korea, the Winter or Summer Olympics, and this time it was in Tokyo, Japan, the ratings are not going to be good just because the time delays and just the way things are going, it's going to be very tough. So if you look at it based on the ratings, it was a terrible Olympic, or not, I'll say terrible, not a very good Olympics, but you can't look at it strictly from that way. I think that NBC, and we'll delve into them before we get to the actual sporting events. I thought they did an okay job as far as, and I'm home right now, so I was able to go to USA Network and NBCSN, even some CNBC, and actually watch some live events of these sports that I'm talking about. And we'll get into that as we go towards to go through the particular sports, what I was able to watch live and see happen. But I'm also home at 1 to 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. If I had a job where I was in an office and I did not have access to a television or my computer, that could have been a little bit tougher. And then you see the results happen, and then you have to watch the delays later on in the evening. That's a little bit tough, I will admit. So this Olympics was a little bit different for me because I am home and able to watch some stuff live. But still, I thought that NBC did a solid job with that. If you went to the when you saw the previews, not preview, but you go to the channel guides, you'd see the event that's taking place every 10, 15 minutes when you're watching something. They did a rundown down to within 5, 10 minutes of what was coming next. An example would be, okay, equestrians from 3 to 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, we're switching to archery from 4 to 4:30. Then we're gonna go to some canoe slalom from 4:30 to 5. Then we go to rowing. They gave you a rundown of what was going to happen. If you went to the channel guide, you saw that as well. So if you're and notice Rick Russo, he's in, and I hate saying this because I'm 40, so I'm not young, but I'm not older. But he's the really traditional viewer of things. The concept of Peacock and going to the internet or watching these different channels, I want to sit down at home at 7 o'clock and watch NBC and have everything laid out for me. That's not going to happen. That's just not the way that the setup is anymore. Times are different. So for him and a lot of his listeners, you hear a lot of older people complaining about that. I'm a younger viewer compared to people in their 60s, but also, I still like to watch tradition on my television, but I'm kind of in between. But if you opened up your mind, and we'll get to a lot of that as well as we delve into viewing the Olympics, you appreciate it a lot more. I think Peacock could do a little bit better job of their layout because I went there and I have Peacock because WWE Network's on there when I watched the wrestling and some other things. That layout was not very good. If I wanted to watch a specific match or whether it was individual or a team competition, it's not very well done. And maybe they're backlogging them. And when I go, because the last time I was on there, I think was Sunday. If I go back on there maybe tomorrow or next day, maybe it'll be better laid out. But for example, if I wanted to watch the bronze medal handball match, I know that's very specific, but people have specific taste and interest. It's hard to find on there, and it won't even be the full match. It'll be the highlights. And what they were promising, you see, the advertisements was having the ability to watch full matches. Or if I wanted to see the gold medal fencing competition, things like that, it's not on there. I actually wanted to watch some judo because I was kind of backlogged and wanted to watch some of that and the karate, and it's not on there as far as the matches. You get some clips and highlights. I want to see the full matches. So I think that they could do a better job with Peacock, but as I said, I have not been on there over the past few days. Maybe they're starting to get those edits in and you get some full matches. So I thought that could be done a little bit better. But I think all things considered, NBC did an okay job, and I thought Tokyo did a pretty solid job in general. The United States had a good overall competition. They won the medal count. And we'll get to another country that is right next to the United States as far as the medal competition goes. But the United States, obviously, they had a very good tournament. You have some of these teams that are just the dominance is great. Women's basketball team, they won their seventh straight gold medal, beating Japan in the finals, came in as the favorites. They're a tremendous group. And I think with the women's teams in soccer, it also highlights this as well. The commitment to women's sports in the United States, while there's still some discrepancies, and as far as equal pay and as far as advertisements and promoting the sports, and women's soccer team has been very vocal about that, and understandably so. The development of women athletes in this country, in the United States, is still very, very good compared to a lot of other countries. And I think some other countries are starting to catch up in that regard, which is good because women's sports is very important. All sports are important. And it shouldn't be looked at as this is women's sport, this is men's sport. It should be sports in general. But in this situation, yes, we're highlighting the women. When you see the basketball team doing really well, winning their seventh straight gold, the water polo team winning their third consecutive gold, the volleyball team, they finally got their gold medal, first time in history. They got in beating Brazil, a team they've lost to in the previous two Olympics in the finals. They earned silver, but they finally beat Brazil to get their first gold. And women's volleyball is a big time entity here in the United States. We cover it a lot here on our site and just in general. You see in those sports and those women sports win, it just shows the commitment not only of those athletes, but the federation and getting those athletes to such a high level. And just a really good job by those teams continuing their dominance. And then the volleyball team, they've been dominant, but not getting that gold medal. That was very big for them. The men's basketball team won its fourth consecutive gold, beating France in the finals. And look, I don't understand this. And Kevin Durant, who is a tremendous basketball player and one of the all-time greats, him saying this is the we beat the won the gold medal despite all the haters. We've done this before on the show as well. This whole notion of I have to overcome obstacles, whatever gets you through the day. But as far if you need if you think everyone's against you, everyone hates you, and you have to overcome that to win, that's fine. If you believe in positivity and self confidence and confirming your greatness and your good skills, that works. Whatever floats your boat. But haters for the United States men's basketball team, look, I know they lost to Nigeria and to France in their preseason preparations or the exhibition contest. I still knew they'd win the gold medal. Now they had to go out and execute, and respect to those guys, and respect to Popovich, the head coach, for coming through with it. But to act like this was the 1980s United States hockey team beating the Russians in the semifinals to eventually win the gold medal, or just like the greatest upset in history of sports, that's ridiculous. And I will say this, it is tough to be the favorite and win because the expectations are there for you to do it because there is pressure in that regard. But the fact that it's like all these haters and then some of these people out there, and did I doubt? Did I have questions about the United States coming into it? I wouldn't say there were questions. I knew they were the favorites and they should win, but it's sports. Anything can happen. But am I surprised that they won the gold medal? No, not at all. And the fact that they're going with that route and saying that we've overcome the haters and no one believed in us, stop that. Stop that talk. We had a lot of people believing in you. Let's go to some individual Americans that I was very impressed with. And I'll say this off the top. If you're an Olympian, period, that's impressive. I don't care if you came in first or last. The fact that you represented your team and your country on that scale, you're a winner in my regard. But there were some that were able to win medals, whether they're gold or silver or bronze, and they get the love a little bit more than others that did not win. And we'll give some love to some of those athletes. Sydney McLaughlin, who I was a little bit unfamiliar with coming into it. I knew that she was an elite sprinter and hurdler, but I was really impressed by her performance, winning two gold medals in the 400 hurdles and then the 4 by 100, and set the world record in that hurdles race to win the 400. And her teammate Delilah Muhammad also set the world record in that race, but finished second. I think that she is a and she's an athlete that we're going to hear from for a very long time. I was just very impressed by her performance, her approach, her attitude, and I think that she brought up a very good point as well. And I do have to bring up the mental health thing because that was kind of an overarching thing with the Olympics with Simone Biles and everything going on with her. I think her approach and her addressing that was very important, saying that she avoided social media, she focused on herself, she really took an approach to acknowledge the nerves and the the energy of the Olympics and going into it, and had a proactive approach as far as dealing with those nerves and doing it. And I think instead of being reactionary, which I thought Biles was, and we'll get to that in a minute because we're going to delve into the gymnastics a little bit later. I think that that was a really good message and approach to it because we're looking at the mental health thing as things are bad, and I don't say necessarily run away, but this is my first time confronting it. I think that with McLaughlin, her message, and some other athletes have said this as well. And Michael Phelps, I think he wasn't in this past Olympics, but he's done a very good job of the mental health and being proactive about it, seeking whether it's counseling or different coaching or changing your atmosphere or whatever works for you, but acknowledging that I'm going to be in this type of situation. It's going to be tough, and I need to address it before preparation. You prepare physically so much, whether it's through your training and your conditioning and studying film or whatever your sport is. You prepare yourself in that regard, but you don't prepare for yourself mentally for what is coming upon you. So I think McLaughlin, I thought that not only winning those two gold medals, she did well in that regard, but promoting that aspect of being prepared mentally for your competition is just as important as the physical, and making sure that as healthy as you could be physically and mentally. I thought that was a very good thing that she did. Respect to Allison Felix, who we've been watching for years. She earned two medals, including a gold in that 4 by 100, 4 by 4, I guess 4 by 100, 4 by 400 relay. And then she also earned a bronze in another race, 11 medals, becoming the most decorated U.S. track athlete ever, surpassing Carl Lewis. she is one of those athletes, and I gotta give credit to Speak for Yourself with Marcellus Wiley and Emmanuel Acho. I was watching their show, and they did a whole segment on Felix, which I'm happy about. I've known about Felix for a long time because I follow the Olympics every year or every cycle that it comes through. Great athlete, one of the best ever. Obviously, all the medals. Became a mother, had complications with her pregnancy, overcame that. She has a toddler child, a son, competing in this Olympics. I thought just a lot of positive news out of that. We heard so much of the negative. And for her, and I think with her, she's obviously one of the greatest sprinters, runners of all time. But you don't really see, she's not controversial. She's not very, doesn't make a lot of bold statements and all that type of stuff. She goes about her business, and I think that what she's doing really well now, which is good, is being a working mother, and that's a very good message as well. You see the commercials with her child. You see that and she's put it out there. I guess she had the scar on her stomach from the pregnancy. She's shown that, which I think is very important for women that have gone through pregnancy and not being ashamed of everything. Well, not ashamed, but being vocal about that. I'm not a woman, so I'm very sensitive about that. I don't want to speak out of term, but being a pregnant mother or being a new mother and still being competing at a high level, I think that's very important and message that needs to be sent. So that aside, her performing at a high level was just very impressive, and she's a great athlete. I think Moo, I think Moo that she won the women's 800 meters. I went to Vanderbilt, so I follow the SEC competitions and the track. They had their track meets this year. She goes to Texas A&M, and I'm watching that, and I see this runner, and she is just dominant. And I'm like, who is that? And obviously that's Moot. And she won the 800 meters. She is going to be one. She might be an Allison Felix type. That three Olympic cycles from now, we're looking at her as winning 11 medals. I mean, that's a lot to put on somebody, but she's dominant in the 800. You know she can run the 400. You throw in some relays. She is just a prodigy. And being so young, I don't even know if she's 20 years old yet. She is going to be a runner to look for over the next few years. Ryan Cluster winning the men's shot put was amazing for the United States, setting a world record. And here's where we go to MSNB. Not, no, this was on, I think, NBCSN. This one was. I was able to watch the full shot put competition. That was really cool. And I think that's where, and it was on NBCSN, which is not one of the big, it's not ABC, it's not NBC. But the fact that I was able to find that channel and watch I like the field events. I like the discus and the javelin. I really like the weighted throws, whether it's the hammer or the shot put. Because then I think in a past life, I could have been one of those guys. And I liked watching that full competition. Him setting the world record, repeating as Olympic champion, was really, really good. The swimming is interesting because I relate to sports a little bit more that I've actually done or have tried to do in the past. I've swam, not a good swimmer, and but respect to Caleb Dressel. He won his won 5 gold medals. Came into the Olympics with a lot of hype. He delivered, winning all of those gold medals. Kate Ledecky, similar deal, won 4 medals, 2 gold. She now has 6 individual gold medals, which is the most of any female swimmer, and only trails Michael Phelps. I don't think she's gonna win all of Phelps medals, but still, she's another kind of similar to Allison Felix. I like a commercial with I think it's Visa where she tries archery and gets into it and tries to compete in another sport, but similar deal. Not very controversial, relatively quiet, and just a dominant figure in her sport. But she did really well in that regard. She won the 1500 meter, which was a she. And I think another thing about her, and I think Felix kind of runs into this as well in track. I think the glamour sprint is the 100 meters because you're the fastest man or woman in the world if you win that competition. Felix doesn't do the 100 meters in that way. She does 200, 400. She does different distances. So it's not like you got to be really into track to know that 200 and 400 are, I'm not going to say tougher than the 100 because the 100 is a beast without a doubt. But with the 200 and the 400, you got to deal with the curve. You got to deal with just different elements. 400 is probably the most respected one because you're going a full sprint for a full lap, which is ridiculous. And then you throw the hurdles in there. 400 hurdles is That's that's probably every sport is tough, but that one not only have to sprint as hard as you can over an entire lap, but you got to do hurdles too. So you got to have discipline and tactics and all that. Those are amazing. So I think Felix runs into that problem. Same thing with Ledecky. She does the long distance swims. She does the 800 meter, which is won every time. She's the youngest and oldest person to win 800 free in the Olympics. She won as a 15-year-old in 2012, and at 24 years old now in 2021, she does the 1500 meter swim. Those are longer distances, which she does she does a 400 as well. But point is, she doesn't do like I think 100 meters of glamour, 200. Those are more the glamour swims, and she doesn't do those as much. So I think she gets a little bit underappreciated in that regard. But still, she is an amazing swimmer. I think she goes again. I mean, I don't know her body and everything like that, but she'll be 27 in 3 years, and that also that ties into a lot of these other sports as well. A quick turnaround this year, I think it benefited some people that the Olympics were delayed a year because they're able to get healthy. But I think that's also going to be eliminate some folks that were probably going to that 3 years and 4 years. You wouldn't think that'd be that much of a difference, but for an athlete, that's a lot. So these athletes have gone through so much training, and they got to turn around in 3 years. That's gonna be tough for some athletes, but I think that Ledeski's young enough that she wants to. If she wants to do it, I think she can still do it, and I think she can get close to Phelps if you look at her total medals in that regard. Asanisa Lee, she won the all-around gymnastics competition for the United States. A very good job by her. I think she's the first Asian American to win the all-around gymnastics championship. That's a very good moment for her. And yeah, this we'll talk about the gymnastics. Yeah, I think the Simone Biles thing. Look, it's not a we did a whole. If you go to our site and you also go to our YouTube page, I did a whole 10, 15 minutes on her and everything that happened. I was glad that so listen to that. I'm glad she came back and won the bronze in the balance beam. So it's good to see her back out there competing again. But it overshadowed a lot of stuff, and for a lot of the team, they were still able to win the silver medal as a team, and I think did it under tougher circumstances because with Biles not competing in that or leaving after one rotation, they couldn't drop any low scores. So their degree of difficulty was very high. So to get to silver was really good. But Biles was the story, and I thought that overshadowed a lot of stuff, and that was disappointing. But Lee winning the all-around gymnastics championship was a very good thing. I got to get to the wrestling and some of that. Gable Stevenson winning the wrestling gold in 125 kilograms, very last move in the match was amazing. And just hearing him do that or seeing him get that medal was awesome. And literally the very last move in the match, about a second to go, he did a guy in escape and got the win. That was amazing. David Taylor finally getting a gold medal. He's been around a long time, and for him to get the gold in 86 kilograms was really cool to see. So I was happy to see him win. And Kyle Snyder, who I think is now you have the OG Gable. We talk about Gable Stevenson, but we also have Gable. You have Smith, who won two gold. I mean, there's been a lot of Olympic legends as far as wrestling go. Kyle Snyder getting a silver at 97 kilograms. Obviously, he was the youngest world champion in American history. Won a gold medal in Rio. Getting a silver this time. He is, I think, you look at his resume, and I think he has another cycle in him. We'll see because he started off so young. Now you got to stick with injuries and him holding up physically. But I think we're on pace. He's on pace, I think, to be the most decorated Olympian of all time. Maybe the greatest wrestler of all time is very tricky because obviously you have Dan Gable. He was able to undefeated, well, win every college match except one, and then win a gold medal. Then you have K.L. Sanderson. He was able to undefeated college career, compete at the Olympics, get his championship. But Snyder, I think you look at his weight class and what he's going up against in this era, amazing. Multiple collegiate championships at Ohio State. As I mentioned, youngest world champion in history for the United States as a wrestler, winning a gold medal, getting a silver here. Just seeing Snyder performance is tremendous. He is a amazing, amazing athlete. But the United States, as I mentioned, they had a really good tournament. and those are some individuals and some teams that did well. I like the United States and China dynamic as far as who's going to win the most medals. United States had 39 gold medals, 113 medals in total. China had 38 gold medals and 88 medals in total. You're starting to see China really do well in different sports. They won 7 gold medals each in diving and weightlifting, 4 in shooting, 4 in table tennis, and 2 in badminton. And the United States doesn't do too well as well in those sports, especially table tennis and badminton. Weightlifting has really dropped off for the United States. The Asian countries and European countries have really made tremendous steps in that regard. The United States has to really step their game up in that regard. Yes, I know we had I think one or two medals in weightlifting. I think a gold medal too, but still they got to do better in that. United States dominated in swimming and track and field, 56 total medals in those two sports. But I think, yeah, the China United States dynamic, I think, is very cool seeing them kind of they go through the medal count, and I think you're starting to see the Chinese. They're starting to see some track athletes get into there, and some of them do swimming, and the diving and weightlifting programs I think are going to grow. And that shooting, there were some clay shooters that won gold medals for the United States. Got to acknowledge that. Table tennis and badminton, Asian countries do very well in that, and some European countries saw some Danes and some Norwegians and Germans do well in that. But I think that's pretty cool to see that go on. And let's get some other thoughts on the Olympics and wrap it up because I know I've gone to a lot. But look, I love the Olympics, and this is my first time talking about them all together. So just keep listening. The 400-meter hurdles race for the men, I don't say it's the best race I've ever seen, but if you look at the numbers, it probably was top 2 or 3 race all time in definitely in the Olympics. And the reason I say that is you got to break down everything that happened. Karsten Warholm of Norway, he won the race, setting a world record at 45.94 seconds. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, 400-meter hurdles, that is probably the most respected event in all of track. It's not the most glamorized, most popular one. I think the 100-meter dashes for the fastest person in the world, and then Usain Bolt and Carl Lewis and other guys have elevated those sprints. But 400-meter hurdles, that's the most respected one. I think you talk to track people, that's the one that you acknowledge. That takes the most to do. So he sets the world record, 45.94, which he broke his own previous world record, which he did a month before the Olympics, by 0.76 seconds. That's a lot of time in track. Point oh 0.02 seconds is a lot of time in track. Well, that's a close race. But if you're getting to the point fives and point sixes as far as time difference, that's a lot of time. So for him to do that in the Olympics is amazing. Silver medalist Ry Benjamin of the United States, he also broke the world record in the same race by more than half a second. Two guys set the world record in the same race. That's seeing that take place. I saw that live was incredible. 6 of the runners in the race set either national or continent records in the race. So it was the fast if you per runner. If you look at it, that was the fastest 400 meters hurdles race run ever. But I don't believe, and I think the numbers are being calculated right now. I don't think there's ever been a race where, I know we had the women's 400-meter hurdles, which you talked about earlier. Those were 2 world records set. But not only having 2 world records set in the same race by that amount of time, but have the six runners in that race set either national, their country records, or continent records, whether it was Asia, South America, United States, obviously with the in Africa, all that set in one race. That was incredible watching that race take place live at one time. That was really cool to see. The United States men's 4x100-meter team, relay team, not even qualifying for the finals. That's a bad situation. And Carl Lewis, who I know is active on social media, but he really ripped into those guys. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, if you're an Olympian, that's an accomplishment in itself. But still, you're the United States who have not been able to win that race in several cycles, but not to even make the finals was very disappointing. And that's Carl Lewis broke it down. Just the training before it was not done. The handoffs were bad. Just the execution was not well done at all. And That was just a very tough thing to see as a United States citizen and someone who follows the Olympics. You know that is really strong. Italy ended up getting it with the sprinter that won the individual 100-meter race. So you know those teams are really strong coming into it, but not to even make the finals, not even get through qualifying. That was pretty bad. Jamaican women sweeping the 100 meters dash was very impressive. For Jamaica, for such a small country, for them to be very strong in track and field, and you look at the funding and you look at the resources and the lack of they have compared to the United States and other countries, just very impressive for Jamaica to do that. Elaine Thompson Hera also won the 200. She won the 100-meter dash and the 200-meter dash. Tremendous performance by her, getting both of those gold medals. Sifan Hansen won the gold medal in the 5,000 meters and 10,000 meters, and got a bronze medal in the 1,500 meters events at the Tokyo Olympics. She is the only athlete in history to medal at those events in the same Olympic Games. Similar, well, as if the 400 respect, once you get to the 5 and 10,000 meters, that's just like a mini marathon. That's another ridiculous event. But the fact that she doubled up in 5,000 and 10,000, those are two very different races to run. It requires different strategy, different staminas. That's really impressive. Get a bronze at a 1,500-meter, which is 4 laps around. So she pretty much won. It's like going from just taking a nice little walk, and this is in track terms, from her walking down the street, in a slow pace, to and doing well in that, to running around the block 4 or 5 times in a sprint and doing well in all those. That's just very impressive performance by her, seeing her win those events and representing the Netherlands and getting that. It's worth looking up. You have to watch the Fiji rugby team singing after winning the gold medal. First time that the Olympics, well, first time as a medal sport, I believe. Yeah, the rugby was in the Olympics. Maybe because I like rugby as well. I like a lot of sports, but obviously for countries like Fiji, New Zealand, Australia, those are the primary sports in those countries, as well as European countries as well. In the United States, they have a rugby team as well, and they do okay. But Fiji first, and I talk about Jamaica being small. Fiji is just as small, even smaller. But for those men to win the gold medal in that sport, that's life altering, not only for those men on that team, but for the country to be represented in that way. And after they receive the gold medal, you hear him singing. I don't know if it's a fight song or a native song, but to see the tears in those guys' eyes while they were singing it so happy, winning that gold medal, I don't tear up a lot for stuff, but to see those guys, at least in sports, but to see those guys do well and to sing their native songs and all up there after receiving the gold medal, I thought that was a tremendous moment. It's worth watching that. Japan finally won a gold medal in baseball. Out of all of the sports, for as far as the host Japan to win a gold medal, they won a softball too. So they dominated the softball and the baseball, beating the United States in each of those finals, which I think I'm sure that's a nice little feather in the cap for winning the competition. But for them to win outside of, I said, the table tennis and the badmintons and those sports they do pretty well in, the martial arts inspired sports, for them to win a gold medal in baseball, which they've never won before, on home ground, they beat the United States, which was rough to see because I like to see the United States do well, of course. But still, for Japan to finally win that gold medal that they've been seeking since baseball became an Olympic sport, and baseball is a major, it's probably their biggest sport in that country. So for them to win it on home ground, that was, from an objective sports view, pretty cool to see. The different sports that I was into that was fun. I mentioned the mixed martial arts inspired sports, judo, wrestling, karate. I follow those anyway, so that was fun to see those people win, in those sports. I get into some of the other sports, archery, badminton, table tennis. The 3-on-3 basketball took me a little bit of time to get into because obviously everyone's played basketball. But their format, like they score a basket, but then the running clock and They take the ball under the net, and then all this other stuff. It was a little bit wonky watching it at first. The United States women won that, so respect to them. Kelsey Plum, among others, got that gold medal. The canoeing and rowing, I'm not the water sports. I'm not a big rower or canoeer. So those sports I respect. I've tried rowing on the machine. Very hard to do. I couldn't imagine doing that on water. It's very tough, very physically demanding. But those sports kind of get monotonous in a way, just watching them going down and rowing and rowing and rowing. It's a little bit slow for my taste, but I try to watch that. The equestrian with the horses. I, my mother likes it. I'm not into the horses too much. I respect them, but to see the horses with the dressage or dancing to the music when they do the solo exhibition, and then the jumping is a little bit more. I can get into that a little bit more because it's pretty basic. Jump over the obstacle. But when they when they're in the middle of the field or the little patch area and do their little dancing or their little trots, I really don't. It takes a moment to get into that. The fencing was okay. I think with the fencing, the unfortunate part is I like this, for protection they wear those big masks, which is understandable. The helmets. I'd like to see their faces a lot more in that. It'd be cool to see them their reaction. I like seeing the faces when people compete, and obviously they have that big mask on, and it's hard to see that going on. But that was pretty interesting to see the fencing. A sport I was not familiar with that I learned about was the modern pentathlon. Who came up with this sport or this competition? You have to swim, you have to do fencing, equestrian, pistol shooting, and then you got to run. I'm used to the heptathlon and that stuff and that type thing, but you have to know how to you do equestrian and then fence and shoot a gun, swim in a pool, and then have to do a long run. It's the most random sport to me. But of course, I was into it. I watched parts of it. It was weird seeing the pool. They did it in the first time. They did it all in one arena. So you have that swimming pool in the middle of a track field, and then they're fencing in the middle of the track, and the horses are doing. And this is all in the middle, and then they do the running, and you would think, okay, if they're gonna run, they have a track to run on. Oh no, they didn't run on the track. They ran around on the grass where they did the equestrian events. That was just a random sport that, in respect to do all of that, takes a lot of discipline because those are so outside of what, like, there's no reason you would, like, you could, there's cross training where it's like, okay, I'm gonna do some running, so because it ties into this and that. How does shooting have anything to do with swimming? Like, there's no connection at all. Fencing with equestrian, there's no connection with those at all, but they put it together. So that was a unique sport. And then lastly, as far as sports that I was intrigued by, why isn't handball a bigger sport? It includes all the elements that you would want in a sport. It's simple to follow. You have six athletes on each side. You throw a ball into a net. The team that scores the most goals win. It's a running clock. You have a lot of jumping and agility because you can't shoot the ball within a certain area that's very clearly marked as far as the penalty area. You have shootouts, you have penalty shots. So that's some one-on-one competition. So it includes soccer, basketball, a little bit of volleyball with the jumping and that type of thing. It's all in one sport. And there's some basketball elements to it as well. There's a lot of picks and screens. And then when you run, you have to dribble the ball every 2, 3 steps. Like, it involves all of these great elements. And why is it not popular in the United States? Well, I think the biggest reason is there's no youth in it. Like, you don't have a high school team playing handball that promotes to college, and they're professional leagues, but they're all in Europe and Asia. So that really hurts as far as the development of the sport. But I think that, and it's going to be in Los Angeles in 7 years. When the Olympics are in Los Angeles, they have to have a handball team. That's nothing about the Olympics. Every sport must have the home nation in it. So that includes these sports that they don't really do too well in, including the handball. So over the next 7 years, you got to find some athletes, and the United States has plenty of athletes that can compete in handball. And as I said, it involves so many elements of goodness. I don't understand why it's not well known in the United States. But if you watch it, you will fall in love with that sport because it is really awesome to see and to watch. And it also has a lot of different nations in it. I will admit though that one is a little bit more European, to be honest with you. So it's a lot of France, Spain, Montenegro. French, they won the handballs, I think, for the men and the women. So those the French teams did very well in that. So it is European based, but man, I watch that sport every Olympic cycle, and I find myself enjoying it because it's very easy to understand and comprehend, and it's very fast paced. Awesome sport. And I'll go into some sports that I was not as much into as I thought I would be. And I think there's a reason for some of that. And we'll go through each of them. The gymnastics, respect to those athletes, those men and women. But yeah, and I've had covered gymnastics back in the day. Well, not necessarily a meet, but some of the athletes, and to see them training is very impressive because these are small bodies doing some amazing things in the air, and when they land on the floor or they do the pommel horse or the beams, those things are solid as a rock. I know there's a little bit of padding, but there's no give or not much give on those things. So those athletes put their bodies through a lot of things. But the gymnastics, I just don't get into it. And then I'm gonna say these sports. I think the sports that have other I'll give Russo credit. We talk about Russo with the start of the Olympics. We'll end up with Chris. I think sports that have bigger aims or bigger goals in a way are sports that are lessened by the not lessened, but as far as credit given or just my interest in them. Boxing is an example. Boxing is tricky because winning a gold medal in boxing is still very highly respected and highly regarded. But we look at boxing as the professionals and winning belts. That's where you look at it in that way. Cycling, Tour de France is the main thing that you look at as far as the top cyclist in the world. The Olympics are right after the Tour de France. It's kind of an odd part of the cycling calendar. So winning it's still very respectful, but my interest in it is a little bit less. Soccer, same deal. And look, I think that you get some of the elite athletes in that. Just talk about Ezekiel Barco in MLS, who plays for Atlanta United. He played in it for Argentina, and that's really cool. I saw Richardson was playing for Brazil in that competition. But we look at the World Cup as far as international competition, as far as countries go, the World Cup's the be all end all. And I think the age limit, it's good and bad for soccer. The age limit is the entire roster, I think, except for two or three athletes on the men's side. Women's a little bit different. On the men's side, needs to be, I think, 23 years or younger. So obviously, your big time athletes or soccer athletes, and it kind of deals with the cycling as well with the calendar. Club teams are about to start up within the next few weeks. They're in training camps right now, even doing exhibitions around the world. A lot of your top soccer players, even if they aren't under 23, aren't going to be participating in the Olympics as much because they're preparing for their club teams. And then also this year, with it being in 2021, you had two major competitions, well, three major competitions that really affected your makeup of your Olympic roster. You had the Euros, and you had Copa America, for South America, and then even the Gold Cup for the North American or the North American teams involved in that. So those three major competitions, which take priority over the Olympics, that really hurt the rosters, in that regard. So that was just a bad break for soccer as far as just the way the cycle ran. But I didn't really watch too much of that. Golf, same deal. You look at even on the women's side, the majors are what we're looking at. You look at the Masters, the British Open, or the U.S. Open, Players Championship, the Tour Championship. Those are really what you're looking at as far as the majors and as far as golf goes. So watching the Olympics was, I don't say, Xavier won the men's championship for the United States. Big moment for him. But yeah, it's just and you look at it, you wanted to see a little bit more. The more of the elite guys competing in that. Skateboarding, I watched the X Games. I used to watch it a lot more when I was younger. I know about Tony Hawk and Bucky Lasek. That's my generation, and Bert Barquist and some of those other guys. And I know about Nigel Houston and some in that group. He's still competing at a major level. But the skateboarding, you have the X Games, you have the Do Tour. I think those are looked at in higher regard than the Olympics. So I watch a lot of skateboarding, or as much as I can, with those competitions. So not as much focus goes into the Olympics. And then softball. Yeah, which is kind of, yes, there's a professional league in the United States. I wanted to watch more softball, and I'll get into a little bit more. But this cycle, it just kind of did not make the cut too much for me. And even tennis, and we're coming off of the majors. We just had Wimbledon take place, and tennis is a weird one because you have major people want to compete in that. Novak Djokovic was in it. He ended up getting eliminated from medal competition. But still, we look at Wimbledon, Australia, and the U.S. Opens in a few weeks, and French Open. So you have those take place every year, and those are looked at in a higher regard than some of the Olympic sports. So those sports I really wanted to get into, but I didn't really get into it as much as I thought I would. But those are my thoughts on the Olympics and everything that took place over the past few weeks.